Bon après-midi. Bienvenue à tous. Welcome to the Canada School. Today we have a very special session for you. Today we are talking about the entrepreneurial mindset in the digital age. And we have with us 4 young entrepreneurs who will talk to us a little bit about their journeys. Have you ever had a great idea? I have great ideas every single day. Do I do anything about them? Not so much. I remember one time I was in the shower and I was wondering, why did that cab take so long yesterday, and I waited in the rain, and wouldn't it be amazing if I could actually look somewhere on the phone to see if the cab was coming, and maybe I could actually see how many cabs there were. And then I continued with my shower. I just kept going. But the people that you're going to meet today, they had an idea and they did something about it. They actually took risks. They actually took a problem, and then they took some resources and they put those two things together and they created companies. And we have ideas and problems and resources that we deal with every single day. The question is, why don't we act on our ideas? So today, I'm very pleased that Anita Baines, Assistant Deputy Minister at Industry, Science and Innovation Canada, will be moderating a panel on the entrepreneurial spirit. Anita, over to you.
Thank you so much, Taiki. Merci beaucoup. So, let's get started. I've got 4 amazing people, and I think that there's a ton of questions that you guys have, but I'm going to start first and get the ball rolling, and we'll take it from there. So let me see. When we talk about this entrepreneurial spirit, I think it's something for many of my colleagues within the federal government anyways that we long for. We have tons of opportunities, but we really are looking to getting your perspective as well on, how did you get started? So I'd like to ask that question, your mindset and how you got started. Who wants to go first? Elena, would you like to start?
Sure. So I have an agency called Communicable Inc., and I work with startups on getting emerging technologies to market and translating their complexity to, I guess, normal people terms. And so how I got started is I've always loved reading. And I've read many, many different books written in many different ways and quite a few languages. And so understanding what people are saying and how to say it, that I guess is the foundational cornerstone reason why I do what I do, is really to help bridge the knowledge that people have, technologists, PhDs, computer scientists, even business people, where that knowledge is something that needs to be translated. Maybe it has to do with the complexity of a particular technology, and it needs to be understood and adopted. And so that's my work, because I think it's important that we all have a really, really good understanding of these technologies, because those technologies affect all of us. And the more we understand about the way those things work, then the more say we can have, the more agency we can have at the end of the day. And that's really why I do what I do.
And you have the courage to follow your passion, which I think is a really big part.
Or I'm crazy.
Or you're crazy. I think, yeah, passion, crazy. I think that's synonymous, right? How about yourself, Zach?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was, I think, very privileged growing up to be able to grow up on multiple continents around the world. I spent almost a decade in Indonesia, the Middle East and the United Arab Emirates, in the UK a couple times, down in our southern neighbors down in the States, and all before I was 18. And I think what's really exciting is when you have the opportunity to grow up. Not only are you completely out of your comfort zone, and you're growing up in, like, for example, I grew up in Jakarta for almost a decade. That city right now is over 30 million people.
Wow.
And being able to just walk down the street when you're not throwing up from the pollution, to understand just what does life have in store, and what the world can be and what you can do world, and then like through my undergrad and my master's, just again, what is global affairs, what is life.
Where did you do your undergrad and master's?
I did undergrad in international development from Dalhousie, and then master's in global affairs from the Monk School at U of T.
Right.
And really interdisciplinary studies and understanding of the world with people who come from very different backgrounds and different countries, and diversity of everything under the word diversity, to really see that if you want to jump in and see, I'm probably the youngest person on this panel here, and
I think I am, but
yeah. Second youngest.
Okay.
And just being able to take that step, and if you fail, you fail. And there's very few mistakes you can pull back at 25 and see,
yeah.
what's in front, and I think that's the most exciting part.
Well, they say if you're well traveled, it opens your mind.
It is. It
Significantly,
really
right?
does.
So,
and just being
yeah.
able to sit across from somebody who has lived such a different world, but you bridge that gap.
Yeah.
Is a great thing to have, and a great foundation of the world. And I think that's the basis of an entrepreneurial mindset.
Thank you. And how about yourself, Romeo?
For me, I was just growing up. I didn't have the joy of living in as many different places as Zach, but I always loved challenges. When I was young, I think when I was in school, I had a homeless person. When I was, me and my brother were talking to him about how difficult our program was, and his response to us was, if it was easy, everyone would do it. And you guys have gone through that much, then you should be able to complete it. And that's been sort of the motivation for me always whenever I start a new business or start a new task. The difficulty is half the excitement, and for me it's sort of like the barrier of entry that if I can pass through, that makes me that much different. And that was the motivation at ITM, and leaving that to start Three Lefts here, with the hope of trying to figure out a way to make research into emerging tech profitable. Was scary and fun, but just
Well, that's the hard part too, right? We have a lot of comfort in knowing we have a job and someone's going to pay us to add some value, but it is really, really hard to have a sustainable courage and discipline to want to keep going. And most people are going to be saying to you, like, it's not going to work, right? Yeah. So it's really tough, and it's really impressive to be able to keep that mojo, right? And Brian, how about you?
So I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. So my father started a business before I can remember, and still runs it to this day. I think the one thing you're going to hear for the next hour and a half across everyone on this panel is just, generally speaking, a higher tolerance, or higher than average tolerance for risk. I think at the end of the day, that's what it takes to be an entrepreneur and do things. As you mentioned, everyone tells you your idea is stupid. Everyone tells you not to leave your job. Everyone tells you your idea has been done 10 times in the past. So the amount of things going against you when you are having these ideas and putting your things together, it doesn't make sense at the end of the day. Nothing in the early days makes sense. You just kind of have to trust yourself and trust the idea and trust your team. And start building it out. And I think I'm also a Government of Canada alumni as well. So I was at Treasury Board for 3 years, sort of Tyke's counterpart in the economic sector, but on the political side. I'll try and draw as much sort of correlation between the two jobs that I've had, both in the public service and seeing how decisions are made, and then in the startup world and how we kind of make decisions and how we get things done. There's, I think, a ton of lessons, but it's kind of two sides of the coin, where public service, it's really like resources first, projects second. In the startup world, it's really like you have zero resources and you have to get something done. And once you get something done, you get your resources. Right. So I think that's kind of what I'll try and focus on today.
I think that's really important, because we are privileged as government, government people, to have everything well planned out and thought through and invested in. And then you look around your team, and you're almost able to plan for most scenarios. But yet we still feel that there's risk involved with outcomes. But yet with those outcomes, we can actually get more investments and more resources almost in a very quick and easy way, even though there is that perspective that we cannot. But when you compare that, and I love the fact that you started that conversation, to the world that you guys come from, it's night and day. And I would like to spend a bit more time on that, right? Like, what has kept you going, beyond your level of risk and courage, which is an obvious one, and I just want to make sure the audience understands that as well. That is a very significant part of is your character. But beyond that, what else has helped you get through that, and what does that risk profile look like for you? Who wants to start?
I guess
Open-ended.
I'll start.
Yeah,
I think
thanks.
For me, the thing that motivates me to keep going is when you've got a team of people dependent on you succeeding and sticking to it and grinding through it, it just becomes that much easier because you're not fighting for yourself or some selfish goal. You're sort of you've found a group of people that believe in you enough to join you and take on this risk that you're embarking on, that it becomes very, very hard to be demotivated by things that happen because these people are behind you and they are smart and they chose to follow you, and you've got to deliver, or at least give it all you have, and you can't sort of go, woe is me, or this is hard, or this is demoralizing, because you will face a lot of defeats, and it's just, for me, that's been the number one driver.
So there's a leadership trait here that's also really important. I mean, we label things, right? So just to kind of connect the dots, there's a leadership trait here where you don't want to let those that believe in your vision, but also their own vision down. I think that's really important. How about yourself, Zach?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think as having joined Romeo in his vision and seeing as Three Lefts grows, I think that's a huge driver of sort of seeing where it goes. And for myself, I think something what I said at the beginning is, there's really nothing that you can't come back from, and that failures is expected to happen. And for the most part, as a startup, if you're looking at like heuristic biases and how you make decisions, you're almost always operating in a domain of losses. And so you're more likely to make higher risk decisions to get out of that in order to be a winner. So, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with way more risk and opportunity in order to succeed? And that's very an individualistic understanding. And for me, it's just seeing what potential is there and what opportunity is there. And I didn't have quite the same public sector career, but I worked for the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in the UK before I joined Three Lefts, and got to see a little bit of how decisions were made and working in more of the counterterrorism space. But really, the startup is, if you don't do it, it's over, and it fails. And I think the big question of how do you build an entrepreneur mindset within government is, if you do a project and it fails, the government of Canada is not coming crashing down behind you.
Well, there's a few that maybe that happens.
Fair, yeah. Fair. I mean, I'm not going to touch that one. But the ability to move on to another project, or really try. I think there was a tweet I saw recently about some of the biggest issues faced by the digitization and the move towards digital in government Canada is, how do we reduce risk to absolutely zero?
Oh,
and
my goodness.
You can't. You can't reduce risk to zero. So how do you deal with it?
Yeah.
And how do you understand that this is an opportunity? This isn't a challenge. There is not a pitch deck that we put in front of our clients that ever has the word challenge. It's always an opportunity.
Right.
There's always, whether we sit in front of a Fortune 500 company that has 50,000 employees and $25 billion in revenue, and then there's Romeo and I sitting there and doing this. We don't see this as a big disparity. We see this as, this is value add, and we are at the table for a reason. So we're not going to pretend like we don't deserve to be here. We deserve to be here.
Right.
So let's prove why we want to be here.
So I think, because I want to take note of your passion, right?
Yeah.
That's also really important, is this risk mindset also comes with a really passionate mindset as well. You got to believe in what you're doing. Most people, right, if you're getting in front of your leaders and you're really concerned and worried, even that profile makes the problem more risky.
Yeah.
Makes your pitch more risky, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas you're like, easy, you believe in this is your baby, you're all in. whatever your DG, that's our terms,
Yeah,
DGs and DMs and
Yeah.
ADMs tell you, you don't care because you really believe in it, I really think that actually reduces the risk profile.
Definitely.
So, instead of you looking for someone else to reduce that risk profile for you, it's
Yeah.
if you believe in it, go for it, right?
So I take calculated risks. I really think risk is good, it's healthy. And what keeps me going is really curiosity, because I want to know. I want to know certain things, and if I can't unless I do them. And so I want to know how blockchain works. So I read and then translate that complexity. Has someone done that work? I do my research and then see who did what. And curiosity and trying to learn new things and stay on top of things is really, really fun. And then also helping companies grow is really fun too. To see us hit milestones, to see brands being in every coffee shop when I remember them small,
Wow.
a room of 5.
Right.
And now they're everywhere. That's really, really gratifying.
So if you were someone who had a big project in government, let's say big, I don't know, like $10 million at your fingertips, and you had a good team and you had to deliver an outcome, where would you see risk in that profile when we start talking about it from that lens of any advice that you can give my colleagues?
Sure. So at the end of the day, I really believe it's not about money. I think you can't really truly reduce risk profile by throwing money at it. I think it's more about the people you work with and understanding the context and how to get things done within the context you're in. And money is great, but it definitely isn't everything. And I have worked in government for 7 years. I've led digital strategy for the Ombudsman of Ontario, which taught me a lot about how government operates. And it's, speaking of government, that's one office that took a lot of risks. They've changed the way that office operates.
They have. But it took, we were talking about it earlier, how many years did it take?
I was there with Andre Maran was there. And so him being outspoken and him being on social media and using it, leveraging it to raise office's profile so that more people can see it as the office of last resort and come and take their complaints to the ombudsman, and him doing systemic investigations. That was all, and that was all risk. And working, I guess, collaboratively is what made it worth it.
Yeah.
Seeing how silos can really connect to deliver the outcome you want is the key skill, I would say. Not so much budget management. It's more, how do I connect the dots here? And what is my context to move things forward?
Which is all about the team and the people. And
Yeah.
I know, Brian, we were talking as well, you're now in a situation where you've got a crazy idea that you've actually started to feel has found its benefit, has found opportunities, and you're trying to navigate through the federal government. What is that like?
Yeah, so I think when you have money, you spend it. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that a lot of well-funded companies run up against. When we had our ideas, we didn't have any money. And even when we convinced someone to give us money, whoever those crazy people were, they gave us very little money and said, like, okay, I'm going to hedge my bet on you. Like, I kind of get that you're passionate about this and it may be something. But I'm not going to give you $10 million. I'm going to give you $500,000, and you're going to have to make that last for 2 years. And if you prove that that can turn into something, then maybe I'm going to give you $1 million or $5 million. And then if that turns into real revenue, you're going to go out and raise 10 million or 20 million bucks. And I think in the case of the startup, getting really big financing is almost an enemy to the early stage, because you immediately think you just have to start spending things, but you don't necessarily know where you're going. When we started our company, we knew the eventual destination, which was data is really valuable. It's available in the public domain, but people aren't using it. We want to help them use it because there's no reason they shouldn't be using it. That isn't a company per se, but it is a concept that we're kind of marching towards. I think we've been around for 5 years now. Probably 4 of those years, we migrated somehow towards that vision, but I don't know if there's a term for it. At our company, we call it the fog of war, where you like
The fog of war?
the fog of war. Like you know what you're doing, but
Yeah.
like you don't necessarily know what's going on because
Like a Game of Thrones episode? Yeah. Not that I'm saying what happened. I'm just,
It's Robert McNamara actually, who
Oh,
was
okay.
the defense secretary in the U.S. That was his like concept of Vietnam, where you like kind of know what you're doing, but you don't have the necessary steps that you're going through. You just know that you're kind of marching in the right direction, and you really hope at the end of the day that you kind of end up where you were going. And it takes lots of development cycles. It takes lots of failure. It takes a lot of success to figure out what exact path to get through. And then once you kind of hit it properly, money becomes your best friend because you're just like juicing the engine and saying like, yeah, I know what I'm doing now. I know my vision. I have my product. I have my true market fit.
Right.
I have my clients. So like, let's throw cash at this thing and just explode it.
I need to like just make sure I've understood what you said. I'm going to interpret it in a way that may be also linked to what we do, across the federal government, right, or governments at large, which is we throw a lot of money at it, and then we think that's going to solve it.
Exactly.
Versus something that even some of my colleagues at the school often talk about, and so do we in other departments like mine, which is the innovation department, which is, can we start to inch our way forward? I'll give you a little bit. It's agile, sort it out, plan it, ideate, investigate, then I'll give you some more, and I'll give you some more. And like that actually makes sense because you're also, to your point, you're not worried about trying to spend it all.
Yep.
You're actually trying to leverage the best that you can and really come up with the right nugget before you keep proceeding, right?
Yeah, it's the business. When I was at Treasury Board, it was, hey, we need $100 million to do this project, and we're going to spend $100 million by doing X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And that's,
crazy
100
talk.
people who cost $100,000 a year. We need to,
Yeah.
it's an equation.
It's an equation.
And
yeah.
then you execute on the equation. You're like, uh-oh, we actually didn't know how to deliver this program, so now we just have a bunch of people who are supposed to be delivering something that we didn't think about. And that's what you kind of get yourself into when you do have resources first, because you're not forced to go through, the eye of the needle and worry about it and figure out exactly what you're doing.
Right.
But once you do get there, that's where you can start adding resources because you have your mission statement, you have your
Yeah.
true market fit, you have your metrics around how you're going to set up success, all that sort of stuff. So now you can add people strategically, and it's going to grow and grow and grow. So that's why you see startups start raising those like huge rounds. It's when the venture capital community has decided that they've figured out exactly what their true market fit is, and there is now formulas to then grow your company to the next phase, and the next. In the seed world, which we all started at, you just kind of pitch an idea very passionately, and you get small amounts of money until you figure it out. And
Right.
I think that's the world that we come from. And government often thinks the other way, which is before we can even have a discussion about delivering this program, we have to make sure we have funding to deliver it to the nth degree for the
Because it
next
feels like
whatever
it's less
years.
risky that way. You're
Exactly.
looking for certainty, but actually you may not necessarily get that, right? You have an opinion?
I think it was just more to that. For us, we've been bootstrapped. We've been around for 5 years this May 4th. And we've been bootstrapped the entirety of the way, and it becomes sort of finding very creative ways to minimize costs but achieve your goals, and finding very creative ways to solve solutions. And it keeps you not just honest, but it keeps you I think we're in a space with a lot of other startups where sometimes we joke about you can tell which ones are funded and which ones aren't because there's sort of
We
a
have
sense of
sweaters.
drive.
Okay. He's got, okay, you guys, yeah, these are rented suits. Okay, I got it.
Is that
Or
some
maybe
back
your
row stains?
friend's suits, and yeah, your stains are.
But yeah, no, it's just it for me. I absolutely love that stage because it forces you to think creatively, find solutions, and then you can apply that to your work, right? So
Right.
you might find a creative solution to a problem, but now we can apply that thinking to a solution for a client that now is happy with what we're doing because we did it for ourselves first, and it just forces you to be very, very resourceful and ingenuitive.
Okay, so I want to do some tech talk, unless you have something you want to add. No? Okay. So the tech talk. So we have to talk blockchain. Just why not, right? We should talk a little bit about that.
I'll go to the washroom.
So I really think that I'd like to try to demystify blockchain a little bit in any way that you guys choose to. Maybe even try to link it to something that would be of great value as within government. And also, there's a concept in government that has lived for a long time called GovTech. So as we start thinking about how great entrepreneurs like yourself can help government solve its problems, that would be really cool to address as well.
Do you want to?
Yes, please, Helena.
Why are you all looking at me?
That's what community is, right?
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah. So there are many, many opinions on blockchain, and blockchain, to me, I keep learning still. It's not truly defined well yet as a technology. As it keeps changing and maturing, it changes faces. So to me, it's this multifaceted thing that just keeps changing and evolving, and so it's fascinating. In government context, there are many opinions on what technology can do. Some would say it completely replaces government. You have very extreme views coming from, I'd say, libertarian arm of blockchain aficionados, where they think, oh, we can just automate everything. There needs to be an algorithm that makes decisions on budgeting. Why do we need people discussing, presenting their points of view? It's irrelevant. There needs to be governance that's fully automated, and you vote in some way, or maybe you don't at all, and algorithm just makes it work. There are companies that applied that thinking and solved real problems with that. And so when we talk about automation, I really think blockchain has a lot to do with that. On the other side of things, you also have technology that enables multi-stakeholder collaboration to a degree that just wasn't possible before, which is where technologies like Hyperledger come in, which is where big companies like IBM invest in that vision, where you have permissioned blockchain, which is multi-stakeholder collaboration still, but you sort of know who the parties are. They have permission to, I guess, participate in that environment. It's you need to show an ID card, digitally speaking,
Right.
to pass through the gates and do stuff. And so those are the two extremes. And along that, there is 50 shades of gray and really fascinating work being done on both sides of this, but also in the middle, which is Microsoft is doing interesting work as well, where they're looking at open source technology, but using it in the enterprise kind of context. And so all of these use cases have certain technological sides to them that are important, to your point of making decisions early. Those are important architectural decisions you need to make early in the project before you even talk about funding or resources. It's talking about architecture when it comes to emerging technologies is super important because switching is expensive.
It is.
Yeah, but it's really fun to play with that because it enables people to do new things in new collaborative way in the completely open space or in the permission kind of way. It doesn't really matter as long as the outcomes are the outcomes you're looking for. As long as you're not, building a surveillance.
Oh, right. Well, I know you guys are in that business, right? So,
I
yeah.
can jump in and
Please.
Where's
Well, I
I'm a
heard,
surveillance fan.
that's what Taiki told me.
yeah, exactly. I could jump in. Yeah, I'll try to demystify when we talk about blockchain, what it is.
Yeah, like dumb it down. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try my best. So the best example that we've seen is like Google Docs, and understand what Google Docs is. Before Google Docs, we'd use Microsoft Word. You'd write up a document, you would save it as draft number 1, I'd send it to Romeo, he'd change it, he'd delete what he didn't want, add it, send it to Brian for draft number 3, and we continue to pass it around, not really saving the past changes, but instead whatever's at the end is at the end.
Right.
And then that's our document, that's whatever value we bring, and now we send it. But now with Google Docs, if you sign on to Google Docs and you write something and then someone change it, you have a version history. You can go back and say, okay, well, what did you do before? Where are these changes? Highlight these changes. What the blockchain is at the core, it is like a database where you store data, except for you don't delete and replace, you append it. It is this like single record of truth between groups of stakeholders where you can see the full history of the data. You can see every transactions that happened. You can see the chain of ownership. You can see the chain of command. And you can see the whole life cycle of data over since the beginning, or however, in public blockchain, which is Bitcoin, we all talk about cryptocurrencies, that we have this value that's created that was built on something called the double spend problem. If I have 10 physical dollars here and I give Romeo 10 physical dollars, I cannot spend that $10 because you physically have it. But what happens if you create digital value that has no fungibility in real life? You have to have some kind of trust system that if I send you this value, that I cannot go and then spend it over here. So what the blockchain cryptographically secures is every time that transaction happens, it stamps it at that time in history that is replicated over tens of thousands of computers on the Bitcoin network, that if you want to change that value, you have to hack into every single computer and change it, or 51% of every single one of those computers to change it. I mean, our tech guy always says like that's something like all the energy in the world times 1,000 years, some ridiculous number, but allowing you to have trust, not trusting the middleman or not trusting an intermediary, but trusting that I have ownership of this. I give consent for you to own this, and now you own it. And that ownership moves and that data moves in a way that you just can't delete it or have some single person controlling it on the ownership, and building this like trustless trust network, as they say. So, it's...
Everyone got that? Yeah. Okay.
So
that was a dummy version, by the way. No, okay.
when I first met these guys, Taiki actually put us in touch, and they came by the office. And I don't do anything in blockchain whatsoever. And I was like, every time I ask anyone about blockchain, they just say, oh, it's a unified ledger. And I'm convinced that no one who actually says that knows what blockchain is.
No way. No way.
So my question to these guys when we met was like, okay, can you explain to me what blockchain is without saying it's a unified ledger? Because let's get into it. Can you guys talk about the music royalties example?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we, one of our most exciting projects, we partnered with one of the public broadcasters in Ontario, Group Media TFO, and they were facing a problem. They're a 300-person organization, but because they create French educational channel or educational content, that isn't a large market, or there's not a lot of companies out there that are doing this. So, but they have clients all around the world, from Haiti to Louisiana to French-speaking Sub-Saharan Africa to France, to all around the world. And what saw with the blockchain is now you have this trusted data source. Now, when someone watches your film, or when someone pays for something or pays for royalty payments, with a blockchain bringing all the stakeholders under one unified platform and one unified data source, the moment that someone watches their content anywhere in the world, everybody whose contract illustrates that they get paid is paid instantaneously.
Wow.
The royalty payments now reduce from 6 months, 12 months, 2 years to 2 seconds.
But that's an economic growth opportunity.
It is.
Like,
It's not
unbelievable.
Yeah, it's
right?
not just how do we save money. We're looking at totally new business models.
Right.
And understanding, okay, now how do we collaborate in totally new ways? How do we reach new markets that we had never knew that we could get there before? One of the big reasons why, like the Disneys and the Warner do what they do, they got billion-dollar law firms behind them that allow them, if they illegally use my content or our content, here's a law firm coming at you at full place that you cannot fight. But with our system, they're allowed to distribute their content around the world, know exactly who's supposed to own it based on what I said about the ownership of the blockchain story and the transfer of ownership and the licensing. And with everyone's contract digitized through the blockchain on what are called smart contracts, everyone gets paid in 2 seconds.
So can we talk about the infrastructure? I'm going to geek out for a second.
Yeah.
Like, what's behind it?
So I guess I'll take that. So our system runs on a proprietary layer 2 application that we call Stonepaper. And the reason why we created it is that our belief for the future is that there isn't going to be a single blockchain. There's going to be many different blockchains, some for payment, some for government, some for some of the systems that we're doing, and you need a system to allow them to communicate. So that's what we build our system on. Underneath, we use Hyperledger Fabric, it's Hyperledger Fabric is our primary chain of commitment, where we use to commit data to.
So what's a Hyperledger Fabric?
Is
Is that like the internet?
Yeah, sure.
Let's just
So Hyperledger is an open source platform. Fabric is still open source, but heavily backed by IBM. So we work with IBM they help us in terms of building infrastructure. So be it the nodes on the network. So one of the things when you're running a blockchain application or when you want to interact with the blockchain application is you'll need a node if you want to control your own data. The benefits of the blockchain isn't just that obviously we all have a shared record, but you control your record. So what that means is that if I create data, let's say I've got my personal ID, my bank account, whatever else is in there, I can share information that information to other people. So it's not just shared information. Whatever's private to me, I hold, and I give access to the people that I want and need to. So having nodes in the system, having a company that can sort of obviously spin off nodes and do the onboarding fairly easy is one of the things that you need. And in terms of just tech-wise, that's sort of the crux of it, of what's behind it. It's sort of a bunch of nodes communicating a string of data together, sharing that same data. And
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I don't think that we within some parts of government anyways don't appreciate what's about to come upon us, because it's actually going to change how we do business, society, how we work together. It's fundamental, I think.
Exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So I'm going to ask you, if you looked into our world, any simple examples of where you think we could improve something that we do that would actually come back and actually help the startup community? Like, is there any, like, it's a little connection that I think, what can we do to help you, whether it's leveraging your technology, or do you think there's a blockchain opportunity or anything of that capacity?
I think one of the things that we've been talking about, like we've been talking to quite a few people in the government. We've looked at things like cross-border trading and being able to sort of know that if a steel is dug up in China, brought to Canada.
I hope all the deputies are listening to this recording. Okay. We'll introduce you to that one.
So assume you've dug up some raw ore in China, you brought it into Canada, it's been tariffed, it's been refined into a part that's shipped out to Mexico, that's been tariffed, and then put into an automobile that's brought back to Canada.
Right, so now it's like
purchase.
overpriced.
Overpriced.
Right?
Now you can sort of, with the blockchain, you can sort of know that the item came through, got tariffed, created what it became, which is this part, that then was a part of this vehicle. So you know that you've already tariffed that vehicle by a certain amount. And since you know you have a gauge of all the parts in the vehicle put together, you know what hasn't been tariffed, what has been tariffed, what came from which area needs to be tariffed at a certain rate. You're sort of able to gather all that information and keep a tracked history of that if you put it through. And we are.
That's an amazing example. It's real.
We have a demo for that too.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we do it now?
And
okay,
also
never
there's
mind.
an innovation challenge also that is looking at that. So to those making the decision, if they're watching,
Yes.
look for 3
That
less.
sounds like my department, so I'm going to have to. Yeah. That's fantastic.
I think what they're hitting on as well is the relationship that government needs to set up with startups. So a lot of the stuff that is probably the low-hanging fruit is like the either impossible because there will never be enough resources to solve that problem, or the stuff that is extremely, extremely manual and outdated. And that's the sort of stuff that if you're not in government, you don't even know exists. So like those sorts of opportunities aren't things where a startup's going to knock on your door and be like, I know you're doing this hyper manual process that you've never
Right.
told anyone about, and it's super inefficient, and like here's a solution for it. That's really where the relationship between gigantic organizations like government and relationships with startups, there needs to be a way where they just collaborate and talk about stuff without the impression that these guys are trying to sell them something or there's a project at the end of the day. This is like, what problems are we facing, and let us actually apply our lens to it, because to come up with that idea and know that it's actually possible, you have to be an expert. And most
Yeah, I
experts
know.
are doing startups right now because that's where the talent is. So that's kind of the relationship that needs to happen. I think that's where government can really help create that ecosystem where people are bringing real problems to the table, not understanding the solution, not knowing that there's financing coming down the pipeline for it, but just being like, hey, this doesn't seem like it's the most efficient way or the best way to do it. Let's see if there's a bunch of smart people out there that
So
are willing
let's
to
take
do it.
that example, right? And I've worked in some different industries. So let's take the example. So if you had to approach a bank with a problem that you think you can solve for them, or maybe they don't even know they have it, or you don't know they have it, either way. So, you know, if I create a parallel world of how do you do it in the private industry with a large M&E, right? And then maybe we can bring it back in.
Yeah.
You know, what has been a successful model? Maybe that's a different way to describe it.
So our experiences with the banks have been, like, what we do is we sort of look at what their mandates are. So
Yeah.
what are they looking to solve? What are the problems? What are they trying to achieve? And then we look for people in there that are willing to talk to us. So
How do you find them?
Smile and dial.
yeah,
You use a blockchain and you go hunt them down through the internet
in the future.
in the future.
In the future. But no, it's a lot of just knocking on doors, talking to people, moving your way sort of through the organization to find the right people to talk to.
Yeah.
And for us, we've talked to groups like Scotia, BMO, RBC, the likes, and sort of just helping them with things like credit memos.
How do they respond?
Some of them, all of them somewhat favorably, but with very cold feet. There's a lot of worry of, especially with the blockchain, with some of the crypto stuff that happened earlier.
Yeah.
So people are sort of a little worried. And then obviously for us, we're also in front of the OSC for some of the projects. And the regulation around some of the stuff that deals with finance haven't been ironed out yet, which means that it's sort of in a no man's land where they're not sure what the rules will be. So they're being very, very slow in that sense. But there is hope and optimism for implemented and reduce it. There was someone that we talked to at the back office that dealt with funds and ETFs and things like that for settlements at the end of the day. And at the end of our conversation, he was like, when this comes, this will literally solve a problem that they've had for the last, since the 1800s. I think his comment was, if you took a day trader from the 1800s and brought them into this world today, they would have no idea what's going on with the computers and everything.
Yeah, they'd have no idea.
They go
so
into
we're
the back office.
Right.
It's all the same.
Really?
It's completely the same.
So if it's from the 1800s?
Yeah.
Okay, mark my words, it may be similar in government.
Yeah, they're not far off.
So I just want to make sure that we are clear on this, right? Because what I'm trying to bring forward in this discussion is it shouldn't matter how big you are as an organization or how complicated our processes are or whether we're public sector or private sector. I think what should matter is, are we willing to take some risk and have those conversations with you? And are we willing to experiment together and innovate and not be so worried about our internal processes or whether we have the procurement model? Because what I'm hearing from many of the entrepreneurs here anyways is you're not actually worried about that right now. You're not. What you really want to know is you would like to have problems that you can solve, right? And try to apply what you've already done. And I think that is what, we started to do that in some bits and pockets within different departments, but we could do a lot more of that. Go ahead.
Also, like, we live and die by the pilot. So you'd be so surprised what startups are willing to do for $25,000 or $50,000. Like, it's not even on the scale of the discussions that happen within departments about budgeting projects.
Right. No, I mean, I actually don't know what those numbers mean, right? In my world, we have
it's
M's and B's at the end of our numbers.
So
No,
25K.
it's true, right? So, yeah.
And then I think in tech, a lot of there's a lot of skepticism of like delivery. And I think that's because the large consulting firms and IBMs and things like that are the ones who are always doing these deliveries, and where we're seeing, the big failures on these huge projects, and that kind of spoils the whole well for, tech in general. Like, hey, it's impossible to get a big tech project across the finish line.
Right.
Which is a story for another day. But the one thing that startups have going for them is it's more important for us that there's success than it is for you to have success, even if it's your project.
Right.
Because I need to take that and I need to leverage it into 10 other clients, and then I need to take those 10 and take it to a venture capitalist to raise money so that I can make sure everyone goes home at night with a paycheck. And like with larger companies, you lose that because it's like, hey, we're IBM, we deliver stuff, but at the end of the day, we're just trying to look at our revenue number the same way the government is. With startups, like, that's not how you think about stuff.
And I think that's really important, right? Because part of what we're really trying to do is get, from a, how do I say this? Part of our role as public sector is to make sure every Canadian, every citizen, every business wins.
Yep.
Right? So, it's our duty to give those opportunities and give them a shot, right? So I think the risk aversion that we have is kind of funny compared to what what we believe we should also be doing. I mean, it's in our DNA to do that. So I think, do you have any real examples of how you've leveraged either an innovation hub or an innovation community or something like that to connect you? Because I'm going to sort of say there's a GovTech thing here, right? To connect you to an opportunity that you've been able to, really, failures and successes either way, right? They're both equally important.
Start with Liz.
I've built those communities. I mean, one of the things I am is I'm a community builder.
Okay, so tell us about that.
And so I've, wherever I go, I put up a tent and I'll say, everyone come here. I've worked with the Toronto Maker Festival would be a good example, where I worked with a small group and we took that event, which is about robotics and things you make physically, or gaming, or VR, AR, different types of technologies, could be science. And you talk about it. It's a big, fun show and tell.
So it's in Toronto,
so it's in
right?
Toronto, but it exists around the world.
Who shows up there?
Sorry?
Who shows up there?
Oh, so who shows up? That's the interesting part. When we took it over, it was a small event run, maybe 1,000 people came to it, held at Evergreen Brickworks in Toronto, sort of remote location. Wonderful, but a little hard to get to. And then our group took it over and thought, okay, let's grow this. This is important. We need to expose more people to all these technologies. And I went with my family to Detroit, which is where one of the biggest maker fairs happen. And it was all pretty white, pretty male of a certain age, but there were maybe 4 or 5 kids just having the time of their life.
Wow.
And I saw that and I thought, wow, this is a family event we have on our hands. It's not a nerd event, it's a family event. And so I came back to my team, and I'm the only parent on the organizing team, and they're like, no. So I went and I had to convince them to make a family pass happen so that I could promote it as a marketer to families, market it that way, position it that way, and so see if people show up. It is such a family event, you won't believe. It's hugely popular with kids. We have partnerships with University of Toronto, George Brown, high schools come, and high school educators come, and it's grown because of that, because we've just looked at that problem differently. And so now it's 11,000 people event. We close streets around Toronto Reference Library at Yonge and Bloor, which is a central location. Very easy to get to, super accessible, it's free. And so families spend their whole weekend there, and there are hundreds of events happening around the city, because it has grown from this small event to a week of making to now a month of making, which we're, let's make a year of making. And that's one example of the more recent example is Camp, which is another event I collaborated on with Deloitte, where I thought, okay, what we don't have right now is a platform that brings together cryptocurrency and blockchain experts, people from government, people from finance, lawyers, people without necessarily background in technology, but with expertise, where if they get exposure and understand enough, it could give them good ideas
Right.
how to actually solve real problems with this technology, as opposed to, I know this technology and now I'm looking for problems to solve, which is just a different starting point. And so we had 3 modules at that event. One was education, 101 blockchain bootcamp for no matter where you come from.
That's amazing.
You come in and you learn something, and it's hands-on learning, as opposed to theoretically speaking, this is what blockchain
Right.
does. Let's trade some cryptocurrency. Let's buy some. Let's send Bitcoin from one person to another. Let's set up a cold wallet. Very, very simple actions that spark something in people because it's first-hand experience. And then we have show and tell, which is all about product demos and people building something. So speaking of startups that have made progress, that have a product, and giving them a platform to show and tell, either a progress, a work in progress is fine, or a complete product, but not a theoretical, I have an idea. You know, you need to have built.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a small panels component, because we still think there are a lot of issues about the technology itself and its limitations, about different applications and use cases, and different adoption use cases that still need to be discussed, legal issues, taxation issues, all kinds of interesting things, design and user experience of that still need to be discussed. So I create those opportunities for others, and it's been really interesting to see what happens next, because people meet each other at these events. And an accountant could meet a programmer, and then a company could be born from something like this. And that, I think, is something government should do more of.
Mm-hmm.
Not events necessarily, but platforms for collaboration, where it's a third place that's not Deloitte. We've collaborated together and they've provided space, but they weren't necessarily fully in control of that event at all. We've programmed it through call for applications.
Mm-hmm. But you
say
do
with-
need everyone, you do need those who have the tools or capacity or capability to pull it together.
To show up.
But
show
yeah,
up. Yeah,
I hear
to
you.
show up and do something and learn from each other, and collaborate in unique ways. And I've done it with events, but Apple has done it with platforms. You
Yeah.
build apps on top. And so it could be seen as Starbucks has done it with coffee shops. You create a third place, and you de-risk collaboration.
Mhm.
And that, I
love
think,
that
is,
idea.
is government's job.
It's open.
And it's open.
Anyone could join.
And it's open and accessible. You do need to put some thought into how you design that third place. But once you do, you can replicate that success fairly easily.
Other examples?
Yeah,
I think
so-
you've got one.
Yeah, we've benefited greatly from accelerators, support, government supporters. I think he's watching out in Toronto, but we've benefited from IRAP out of the NRC for many years through our industrial technology advisor Ron Young. So a quick shout out, and just being able to get the support from IRAP that not only just gives you funds, but they support you. These ITAs are extremely knowledgeable and experienced in building companies and
Yep.
in technology, and
Yep.
and they're, you know, the benefit of coming for the NRC is they're not at private companies, like whether it's the IBMs, who've been big supporters of us, that have, you know, monetary objectives to help you're growing by using our technology, so we'll make money off of you growing. But with, you know, IRAP and these other programs that not all startups figure out how to leverage, that they're there because they want to see Canadian intellectual property. They want to help you get Canadian people in.
Absolutely. Yep.
To see you grow. And we've been so like blessed to have that in our growth. And
That's a shout out for
it's a
our
shout out,
government
so
programs.
for our next project. And then moving on to like the IBM innovation space, they have a space out in Queens Medina where we've been into because we've built on their technology and having, the executives, and it's a 15,000 person company.
Yeah.
Well, the one in the Canada arm, being able to help us open doors, and the Ryerson Legal Innovation Zone in the DMZ and being part of it, where we're not looking to constantly sell to IBM or to these other companies,
Right.
but helping us grow and providing us with support and partnerships beyond just, we can make money off of you, so that's why we're going to support
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
But, allowing startups to thrive, and I think a huge benefit, which is exciting in the startup world, especially for young individuals coming out of school. A lot of the big companies and big value organizations won't give you the opportunity to thrive early on and see something different. That, it's about moving up, and experience and years there and seniority allows you to make the decisions. But I think any research out there shows that that's the correlation between just because you've been there for many years, you know how to make the right decisions.
Oh, that's not true. Yeah.
Being able to, like Romeo giving me the opportunity to make decisions and fail and succeed very recently out of school is such an exciting way and such an interesting way to grow and learn with the support structures, and not have to wait for my time in order to move up, in order to make these decisions is exciting. It's new, and looking for those big companies to support you and the accelerator to support you behind it it seems like it's a win-win for everybody.
Well, thank you. I know you have a comment, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn to the thousands of questions we have online.
That's a lot.
I know.
So my comment, for me, it's this is my first startup. I actually had a startup, the third one, but my other startup, when I started, these programs weren't in place. So the last one I started was ITM in, I think, 2010, but officially 2011. And I didn't have the Legal Innovation Zone to go to, or IBM, or the DMZ at the time. I think the DMZ came about a little after that. But it was very, very difficult, and you had to figure out things yourself. And I mean, it helped in that, like, you sort of sorted out. But this time around, when we started 3 Lefts and we got into the Liz and the IBM incubator, the access to sort of the knowledge. So it's not just the money, which is great. The access to the insight, for someone to sort of come in and go, for them to bring in entrepreneurs in residence who have done it before, and to go, hey, I've tackled that problem. This is how I solved it. This might not be, just giving you that option and the insight has been one of the greatest things, like from my side. It's been amazing to get those mentors where before you had to go and seek them out, knock on doors.
See, that's what I like.
Get them to like you and get them to talk to you.
Right.
Now you sort of,
now they're
available.
They're available.
Grab
Exactly.
lunch or coffee, and it's been for me it's been the best part, because it's I don't have to face any of the challenges alone.
And then they can buy you your suits or whatever.
I borrow their suits.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you borrow their suits.
Are the exact same size.
Wait every day. So thank you so much. Alors, on a beaucoup de questions sur le slide.
There's many questions on Slido. Let's start with a really interesting question.
Just failure, Brian.
So that one's an easy one for me. The ability to say no. One of the hardest things for startups, I think, is to say, like, no, we can't do that, or we're not doing that. In the early days, whenever anyone comes at you with, like, the slightest bit of an idea that slightly overlaps with what you're doing, the desire to say yes and build a project it's a huge mistake that everyone goes through and learns. So that, and then combined with being able to look people in the eyes and say, like, no, you have to pay me for that. Not doing that early enough, I think those led to our early failures. Luckily, we were capable of surviving them. But that upfrontness and the ability to actually stick to your vision of what's right, and not migrate that or evolve it to what one single client thinks is right.
That's tough.
It's very tough.
That's tough.
Very tough.
A lot of resilience required to do that.
Yeah. It's fundamentally the difference between the product and the service at the end of the day, which is why product, you have a vision, you log in, and this is the steps you go through. And with services, you need to have a lot more hands-on client serving, and it's always this sort of, with the software as a service model especially, it's always this tricky dance you need to dance where it's why I look at companies I work with and I think, okay, are you product first or are you service first? Because those are really different businesses today.
Thank you. So we have, I think, a question.
Yeah. So I think you're all in your 20s. And if you're not all in your 20s, you haven't left them a long time ago. You all somebody has given you capital. Somebody has given you responsibilities. Somebody has given you employees, and you have revenues and you have payrolls to meet. In the government of Canada, we tend not to do that. In the government of Canada, we tend to think of people in their 20s as still kind of incubating, learning, growing. And by the time they hit their late 40s and early 50s, then we're going to start giving them some responsibilities, and 10 minutes before they retire, we're going to make them something important. Talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges that you face as entrepreneurs in your 20s. You say you go and you knock on the door of banks, and you go and you knock on the door of governments. Do you face resistance by the fact that you're in your 20s, or is that something that everybody outside of government understands, that doing important things in your 20s is natural and normal?
I think if you showed up to a bank with a startup these days and you were 50, they'd look at you funny. To be dead honest with you, it's such the culture now that's the norm. We go to the banks and one of us wears a suit, and then we bring someone who's in a hooded sweater who doesn't really talk and is awkward. And it's like, that's like the experience that people almost want, where it's like, yeah, I want to buy something that reminds me of Mark Zuckerberg in 2003, but I also need to give them $1 million, so like there better be someone here wearing a tie. So we kind of play that game a little bit. But yeah, at the end of the day, like that's what it is now. Everyone who has the hustle and the fire still in them to pull a company from an idea into chances are has some 20-year-old blood in them somewhere, because the risk profile just gets so much higher the older you get, right?
Yeah.
And to be honest, if I had to start all the way again from ground zero, I'd have to rethink about it. Like we did it once, and hopefully I don't have to do it again. But yeah, so I think it's pretty, I don't know how you guys feel, but it's pretty much standard practice.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way you feel. I'm not in my 20s anymore. I've had the joy of finally getting into my mid-30s. But I think earlier on, when I started one of my first companies, I think when I was 20, and like just turning 20, and that was really difficult. But that was also in 2004, where I think that the sexiness of the startup world wasn't there yet, and there was a lot of banging on doors and getting, what experience do you have? Why?
Yeah.
What makes you think you can help us? Thing. And sometimes they were right, because I was sort of going in there gun-ho, coming out of school without any real-world experience and fully understanding their problems. And sometimes you need the insight that hasn't been burdened with the difficulties of whatever those structures are beforehand, to give you a fresh take on it. So
Yeah, you don't have the baggage.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just say something. It's in life in general, you're navigating bias. It's just a given. And so I think to navigate effectively, you just need to understand what are the bias on the table. Let's sort of address them, maybe not directly, but indirectly. And so I'm in my 30s, and having sort of gone through life, English is not my first language. I was dressed where right was rarely what I did, and I've worked high elements and officials and many steps, many of you know. And so, do I show up? Someone, me. At the end of the day, and the way I navigate forward is I navigate through ideas, and I say, please don't. Let's not talk about Let's not talk about whole art. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about this thing that we can do together. And de-emphasizing SN.
Yeah.
And understand that whatever you have across you, you don't know their story. You don't know. You have preconceptions of who they are. They might have, to your point, moved around, lived in many countries, have lack of experience. That sort of compensates
Yeah.
for your lack of age.
Traveled over the world in your mid-20s.
So you
right?
evolve quickly, you grow
Yeah.
up quickly. Maybe you have someone across the table from you who is in their 50s, 60s, but they just never grew up.
Right.
That happens quite often.
Like me. Do you have a question?
I do. And thank you. I think you seem like an incredibly compassionate human being, so that's just lovely to hear. In the government in Canada, we have a lot of generalists, and I would consider myself to be a generalist. Up on stage, I see you as experts. So is it possible for someone like me who's a generalist to have that entrepreneurial spirit, but not really owning something, like not owning blockchain, not owning crypto, not owning big data? So like, what advice do you have for us generalists in the room?
Me, I'm a generalist.
And I'm a former journalist too, so I relate.
Oh, nice.
I think it's a unique strength, and one of the helpful things, because I think about this a lot. We do have a world of experts we operate in, and as generalists, that's not our strength. Our strength is in connecting the dots, in collaboration, in creating opportunities, in thinking about things in new ways, because you've just happened to think of how this medical research applies to this IT project, which, what? Mm-hmm. But generalists, you do that. And in my recent role where I worked as VP of Marketing at Shift Network, which is a blockchain-based credentials network, I had some really hard problems to solve. They couldn't talk about themselves. They didn't know who they were, how to talk about that technology, and because it's so many applications, so many use cases, and drawing on that knowledge, generalist knowledge, is super important to see what paths forward may look like for companies, for businesses, for governments. It's incredibly important, and our CTO gave me a helpful, I guess, straw to hold on to as a generalist swimming in the sea of experts. She said, well, it depends on the point of view. If you look at it sideways, it's all the depth you'd ever need.
That's actually really smart. I like that. Thank you. Yeah, you had a comment as well, and then we have another question.
Sure, yeah. I think this also builds on the question about like what skills you need to work in technology. I remember sometime last year I was giving a speech, speaking in a panel, and it was like the head of some business school, like I think Stanford, and some of these big academics in these big schools, and then there was me,
And there was you.
who was, I think,
And they're all
most of
60
the
and you're
students,
20, yeah.
and having this, and they were coming from the technology side, and basically the premise of my 30-minute speech was, you know, the skills and the understanding of technology is not that the technology is the solution, but it's the amplifier of the intent behind the solution. And I was sitting in the airport this morning, and someone was wearing a shirt that said, access equals inclusion. And that got me thinking about the questions around, like, what are these $100 laptops that got thrown around quite a bit, that if we give kids in the developing world a laptop, everything comes, you know, just internet solves everything, but it doesn't.
If you all learn to code, it's magically
exactly.
solves
If I have access to Wikipedia, I can somehow solve this problem.
Right.
Yeah, I think I'm very much a generalist. Also, I never worked in tech before joining Three Lefts. Romy and I met on a softball team, and we didn't even know, like when I saw my first day, it was like, what's blockchain? What's technology? But I think the ability to look at, you know, just because you can put 0 and 1s together, or you can think about, you know, how to fill out a balance sheet or how to do a business plan, but to understand that all of this is some kind of tool to get you to solve a problem or to solve an opportunity. How you solve that opportunity is the real skills, and not understanding the cryptographic nature of the consensus mechanism of some kind of blockchain. But when we go into the meetings, okay, well, you have an issue sharing data. okay, so let's figure out how do we solve this, and being able to understand all the different policies, regulations, issues that are all coming together in this interdisciplinary way now in this massively globalized and complex world. We all are generalists that we can pinpoint that, okay, maybe blockchain, maybe big data, but in reality, we're all solving roughly the same problems, just in different ways. And I think that's what an entrepreneur is about. That if blockchain fails, we're not failing as a company. We don't say we're a blockchain company, we solve, this is our statement, and we're using technology to solve it. But if that technology doesn't work, whatever comes up next, we're going to constantly adapt to new technology to solve the problems that we see are out there. And,
That's great.
And those are opportunities.
That's
that are in front of
entrepreneurial,
us.
for
Yeah.
sure. Question, you've been very patient.
Yes, you segue right into my question. So I'd like to ask you about pivoting, and from both your own experience. So how many times in a week do you pivot individually and what you offer in as an organization? And then what does it look like to deal potentially with our pivot lag in the government of Canada, and how can we meet each other sooner?
Nice question. Thank you.
That's a hard one.
I can hop into the pivot stuff. Okay, so I'll kick it off by saying I think pivot, there is an entire spectrum of what pivot means. Everything from like a micro adjustment to like a complete 180 on your business. I think successful startups make very few big pivots. Micro adjustments happen on a daily basis in every aspect of running a business. But we always use the analogy of sailing from Europe to North America. You know you're going to North America, you may not know exactly where you end up, but you've got a destination in mind. The ship's going to get there faster if you just kind of track rather than turning the ship back and forth and sailing all over the place and dying. So I think pivot, let's think about it a bit different as far as like, how do you make micro adjustments to your overall strategy? If you do have a goal, mission statement, whatever in mind, it becomes a lot easier and a lot less troublesome to pivot because you still know you're going in the right direction and you're always kind of marching the same way. When you don't have that macro vision in place, pivot becomes very dangerous because you end up chasing things down rabbit holes, completely changing your mission statement, changing the direction you're going in. And that ultimately doesn't get you as far as heading in the same direction, even if that direction is slightly weaker than some random ideas that are coming around. So I think solid businesses and growing businesses pivot all the time, but it's not the same as completely changing your business model and deciding that there's a whole new things. There's a ton of success stories of those gigantic pivots as well. But if you look into the histories of the companies who have done it, they've done it really early and they've committed 100% to the pivot. And then they built basically starting from the ground up all over again. Slack is a great example. Slack was a gaming company. They pivoted into basically MSN Messenger, but huge pivot, but they committed and pulled it off. Companies that do that 2 or 3 times are dead in the water.
Shopify is the other one.
They have a lot, they need to evolve, actually.
Yeah.
Interesting challenges on their plate. Speaking of pivots, I want to sort of reframe that. That word is not optimal. I think of it more as feedback cycles, and you need to listen to that feedback and adapt. And so whether it's a micro adjustment or a macro adjustment depends on the feedback loop that you're going through. And so if your feedback loop says to you that micro adjustment is fine, but then you encounter blockchain, there are disruptive technologies. They're called disruptive for a reason. Some of that might challenge you into a macro pivot or micro, depending on your use case, but rethinking where you're going, how you're going, how you're going to get there, and rethinking your mission and asking those questions over and over again. And so this is where it's different for government than for startups. And for government, there is a sense of mission. There is different pathways to get there. How fast you get there may not matter as much to government. or
does.
maybe it does. Depends.
Yeah.
Depends. There's
Yeah.
complexity to
Yeah.
navigate through before you even get into water.
Yeah.
You need to build the ship to begin with, and that complexity slows you down. You're building a big ship, which you then get in the water and move to North America, whereas startups are smaller and they have a lot more adversity to face, but they might get there faster. And some of it is luck, but a lot of it is ability to adapt and resilience that comes with that.
I think the questions that you're hearing, I think you have a question as well. The questions that you're hearing are looking for those entrepreneurial spirit, ideas, characters and traits, right? So that we can take our big ship and try to find some of the small, nimble pieces. Did you have a comment, Romeo, before we move on?
I think it was more aligned with both what they said. For us, one of the biggest challenges that we face is the industry that we're in is very, very fluid. It hasn't maturity, it hasn't settled. So one of the things I think late last year that we faced was just what's going to be our first actual product?
Right.
Is it going to be a system for lawyers? Is it going to be a supply chain tracker? And sort of listening, as you said, getting that feedback loop. Not necessarily, I wouldn't call it pivoting in the same way that you said that, like large scale pivots, but pivoting our trajectory based on sort of what the market trends are, what's happening, and listening and getting that feedback and being able to move maybe a bit quicker than the bigger guys because we're small, and being able to execute on that is sort of the factors of it. So, yep.
Thank you. Question?
Just a quick question. When we're talking about pivoting, you think about agility, and one area of the government which may not be as agile as we would like is in the area of procurement. So as entrepreneurs, how do you find the challenges of procurement working with governments and the public sector?
I think if I'll just go. I remember we were up here sometime last year meeting with an agency here, and we're talking about how we could potentially leverage our technology into their value-added service. And the response right off the bat was, we would crush you with what it would take for you to get in for us to work together. So what we should do is, you have a strong relationship with a Fortune 500 company. We will subcontract you through the Fortune 500 company because the hoops alone that you have to jump through will crush you. And not unexpected, but it's tough. I think one of the greatest things that the Canadian government can do for Canadian startups is a legitimacy factor. And you're looking at building Canada solutions, looking at the innovation challenges, the agile procurement that the government is undertaking, which you're no longer looking at 200-page RFPs. You're no longer looking at 2 years procurement. I mean, we're on a month-to-month basis when you're bootstrapped, and you're even a week-to-week basis. And so when you have to wait, even for like a $100,000 project, $50,000 project, and you have to wait 6 months to hear back, that's really hard to forecast. And it's hard to go into Salesforce and be like, when's your close date? I'm hoping sometime in the next year, and trying to forecast whether it's to get more funding, whether it's for debt financing, all of this to get that understanding that, some of even if we're in a Fortune 500 company, they'll tell us, we'll give you an answer next week, whether or not we go. But the steps to go through that allow us to not only get, and we really value the potential of coming here and talking and meeting with all the different deputy ministers and their teams to understand, what we can potentially provide as a value-added service. But we also have to take it from the other side that we can't wait years in order to move through it. So it's a tough question. All I can say is from the conversation we've had, moving in the right direction, that allowing smaller startups to thrive and to really prove out their products, being whether the Canadian government's the first buyer or they will open up doors and say, yes, we believe that this is a solution, whether it's through IRAP, to allow you to go into those doors and fight for those bigger contracts. But it's tough, and we understand. I mean, there's a question here about what's it like to be risk averse and risk tolerance. I mean, it's really tough. Like, what is risk? Opportunity times likelihood that it's going to all coming down and failing. And what your risk tolerance is really just how much am I willing to take to see a failure happen? If I'm at the DM level, if I'm at an analyst level, our risk tolerance might be the same, but our values are hugely different. That we have $1 billion project here, we have a 50,000 project here, but it was really trying to understand how we can engage with companies to hedge ourselves and to really spread the risk around and realize that we're not just selling to you for the sake of selling to you. We want to grow. We want the partnerships. We want these legitimacy factors that come. That's not just a paycheck that allow us to, as Brian said, leverage to 10 other people, to 20 other people.
So I think
to
this
50
is an
other
opportunity for government to innovate. And I started to cut you off because
100%.
I'm getting signals that I got to, kind of close off our panel. I cannot believe an hour and 20 minutes have passed by us so quickly. But I actually think, just to kind of close off, there's a lot of tremendous opportunity for us to learn what you need, because we actually want to help, right? That is actually part of our duty and part of our job. Keep up that really loud voice from all four of you. I really, really appreciate it. On behalf of the school, au nom de l'école, merci beaucoup.
On behalf of the school, thank you very much.
It's been a tremendous honor to even have an opportunity to listen to you guys, and I have some ideas in my mind now in terms of what I can do to help as well. I think that I have some administrative comments here. I'm not very good at following directions. Your feedback's really important to us. I invite you to complete the electronic evaluation that you will receive in the coming days. And also, the school offers a whole bunch of other events. So I encourage you to visit the website and take a look and see what else is going on in this beautiful place. Merci beaucoup encore.
Once again, thank you very much.
Good job.